So hello, I'm here with Liv, and we're going to have a little chat about sort of the valuing of the arts and literature in everyday society, particularly in the UK. Should we just introduce yourself a little bit?
So I'm Liv, and I'm in SUPCO as the Inclusions and Welfare Officer. That's all I need to say, I think.
Fair enough. So we're going to start with talking about a recent statement made by Rishi Sunak. He sort of said that those with pay insecurity should retrain, a comment that felt primarily aimed at the arts. What do you think about that? Like, it's just as a starting point.
I suppose I think it's quite hard to hear, especially with relation to the arts, when during, the last sort of 6 months has been such a difficult time for anyone who's kind of professionally involved with the arts, that it kind of feels quite difficult to say that actually now's the time when these people need to retrain and do something else, when actually it feels like a time that we should really be actually investing in rebuilding what we have within the arts. So I think it's it feels quite, to me, contradictory to what I would hope a kind of an approach would be.
Yeah, I know, I agree. I feel like over the course of lockdown, I came to value the arts more than I ever have, personally, and even as someone who's very involved in arts and maybe at some point wants to work in the arts professionally, I didn't realise how much I consumed until I had nothing else to do, and then it was sort of like, oh my gosh, and then how could we live without this? Like, my personal view is that it's essential to sort of society, arts. Like, there's no reason. Go on, sorry.
It's absolutely that question of, it's quite easy, particularly during a pandemic, to see, science is absolutely necessary. And if we're drawing that broad distinction between science and the arts, which I think can quite often be done far too simplistically, but if we to take that for the moment, it's really hard, because we all suddenly, the kind of scientists with the people at the top kind of working to solve the issues, and the vast majority of people were there relying on the arts more than ever, and and in the way they interact with it on a day-to-day basis, it's there, it's that absolute necessary, it's on the same level as the science. And I think it's quite hard to deny that, when obviously I'm aware that there's so many of the people, particularly in the country, who are key workers and didn't have sort of a sudden load of time to themselves. But I was lucky enough to not have to work during kind of the first bits of lockdown, and I think a lot of people who are in similar positions to me, we relied on it. It was an absolute necessary that we have the arts, and that applies outside of a pandemic scenario. That's how we live our everyday lives, and I think it's so enriched in our culture that you can't suddenly kind of, I feel like it's a bit of a contradiction, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, between the way we consume the arts and the way we value them as a country.
Yeah, I think it's odd to think about. If I think back to school, it was always perhaps less so with literature, which, as it's Literature Day, is sort of the main topic, but particularly with theatre arts and music arts, it was sort of weirdly discouraged. In a way, I went to quite an academic school, and I think if I had gone to perhaps a different school, I wouldn't be studying a hard science as I am now. I would probably be studying English or something. So I find it weird that it sort of rooted itself in all levels of education, from like a very young age. It's like, well, if you're good at maths, then you're clever. If you're good at English, then you're normal. It's sort of what it felt like, which isn't true, and definitely had an effect on my peers and me as well, I think. In terms of the way that we value art. So I've had to do quite a lot of work sort of unpicking that in my brain and sort of refocusing the fact that I actually do value the arts highly, and as we all should.
Yeah, and absolutely, I think it's that thing when you grow up in an environment that is sort of telling you one thing through our education system, you grow up and you kind of have these very kind of implicit ideas about what the arts are, what they mean, that might not line up with the way you participate in the arts or the way you consume the arts. But yeah, you kind of find yourself having these sort of biases and these judgments there that you really don't like, because they're not what you necessarily agree with, but a product of the environment that you have been brought up in. And I think there's definitely some work to do in unpicking those and kind of separating those from the views that you sort of, what you consider and what you come to believe, rather than what you sort of brought up around, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think possibly part of it is that when we were younger, if we did hobbies, it would be like we go to ballet class or like acting, like we go to stagecoach or something. It was always seen as an extracurricular rather than a fundamental part of like a healthy kind of balance of life, which is, you know, do some things that are arty, some things that are sciencey, and some things that are just academic, and some things just lying in bed watching TV. So I think it's like the way that we view it is like it's a fun hobby.
Yeah.
A lot of people who have never really interrogated that will view acting as like a fun hobby, apart from the very few, like, you know, Martin Freeman, people like that who have had very like extended stage careers. I think it's kind of a harmful view to take, in my opinion, that it'll feel like it's less. I think maybe possibly that accounts for sort of some of the devaluing, is that it's like, oh, you're doing a dance degree, you're just doing that for fun, really. No, you're doing a dance degree because they, you know, someone enjoys it and they love doing it and they want to have a career in it.
And I think it comes down to that thing that, you know, you see so often with artists in whatever sense of the word. And, you know, it's that thing, because someone has a real passion for their job, then it's kind of sort of automatically devalued by society, because they're not dragging themselves out of bed every day to go and act or to make music or whatever it is they're doing. Whereas, you know, there's kind of this trope of people maybe like in finance who it's so stressful and they can't cope with it, but they drag themselves out of bed in the morning and work really hard and earn loads of money. And you think, well, actually, if you enjoy something, does that then take away from what you've given to it? Because I'm by no means saying that working in the arts isn't stressful, doesn't take that same level of commitment, because I know it absolutely does. But does that level of it being something that you really care about and really genuinely love, does that take away from it being, oh, like, good on you, you're putting all your work into this thing? I don't know if that's a part of it.
I think, I mean, my personal take on that is that it's like, more than anything, what's valued in the under capitalist sort of the way that we live is productivity.
Yeah.
At the cost of personal health and enjoyment, in my opinion. So it's like, if you're seen doing, if it feels like you're doing something, whether or not you will be doing it, getting paid or not, because again, like I the things that I do that are arty, like photography and all that, I get paid to do it, but I also do it for fun all the time anyway. It's part of like my everyday experience, and because of that, it feels like, oh well, if you enjoy it, then anyone can do it, and as a result, that sort of devalues it further. I don't know. I find it quite frustrating, especially when it's like I've been asked to do photographs and then I get lowballed because they're like, well, you've just got, you know, I'm basically paying for the camera. I'm like, yeah, but the camera cost me quite a lot of money for a start, and also you don't like I know how to use this camera. It's not just point and shoot. You know what I mean?
Involved, you know, is
it's not just like you're paying for my time and my skill, and the same applies to like writers. Is I feel like it's not understood the amount of time and effort and like soul that goes into work, and like that's not replaceable. You can't just retrain that into like a mechanic or something without it being a great personal cost.
And I suppose what I'm sort of thinking about now is maybe a little bit off topic, but in terms of the way we value the arts and with, you know, the way we use the internet now, is there something in there about how if something is on the internet, people expect to be able to find it and use it for free? The ability for people to do that with creative media, does that then sort of devalue it? And, you know, if something is put up and you can find somewhere to pay for it, but there's a lot of things that because they are just on the internet, people expect to be able to dig around and find a way to get it for free. And, you know, what does that say about the way we value our artists and the way we consume their work without wanting to give anything back? You wouldn't dream of going into a shop and taking something and think, oh no, I'm not going to pay for this. But if there's something and you want to find it streamed online and you don't want to pay for it,
then you just take it. Yeah. I mean, I suppose there's, I mean, the argument that could be made there is that accessibility comes first, and people won't be able to, which obviously is something that's very close to your heart. So like people who don't have expendable income in the same way that some of us do, should the arts be inaccessible for them? And the answer is obviously no, but the answer is also artists need paying.
Get to that point. And I think, and for me, that's one of the things where I see the most value of the arts and to the arts is in the changes that can be made and the kind of sense of community that can be built around the arts, and people who wouldn't necessarily engage with that idea of, for example, like, you know, the typical theatre goer, but actually how we can use the arts. And I suppose theatre is my area of kind of where I've got more knowledge, but whatever that might be, how that can be used to make real change and real development within communities that probably don't fit under that band of, you know, having expendable income, being able to access that, going out on a night to the theatre, or go and listening to an orchestra or something like that. You know, I think there's a real juxtaposition between the way the arts is used and kind of considered, and the way where there's so much potential. And I think we're really missing out on a lot of value there by kind of almost trying to reserve it for a particular group. And I think that's really damaging.
That's hard, yeah. No, I agree. Unless we've got anything else to say, we could draw it to a close there. It seems like quite a nice natural ending of just like it's all a balance, and we're not really quite sure how to work.
I suppose what I've kind of been reflecting on a bit at the moment is how we see, you know, with coronavirus, we see science as this massive necessary. It's absolutely vital in our survival, you know, how we're living on a day-to-day. You know, I'd say the majority of people are listening to, you know, science and everything more than they have ever done before. But why? Because one thing we see is absolutely necessary. Does that make what we kind of draw this divide between, does that make the other redundant? Why can't we hold both up to being, these are both absolutely necessary for our society and culture, but in different ways, and kind of hold them both with the same value? I don't know why that doesn't exist, but I don't know how we get to a point where it does. And I think that's one of the challenges.
I think that's the main challenge for the arts at the moment, is garnering value in the eyes of people who previously didn't value it properly. I think it is sort of the main message of this of this workshop, I think. Yeah, well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Nice little chat.
Yeah, nice to talk about something a bit scary and depressing, but you know, what can we do? But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome.